If you would like to listen to or download any or all of Power at Work's blogcasts in podcast form, they are available for streaming and download on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Just search Power at Work on any podcast platform and enjoy all of Power at Work's podcasts. While you're there, two things we would like you to do. First, subscribe, and that way you won't miss any Power at Work podcasts. Second, please give Power at Work a 5-star rating, a like, a love, whatever is the tool that your podcast provider gives you. It helps others who care about workers and worker power to find Power at Work's content. They will be grateful, and so will we. Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to the Power Half Hour live on LinkedIn and published for posterity on poweratwork.us. I'm Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. The Power Half Hour brings you more voices, more news, and more worker power insights in just 30 minutes. I've got an expert panel of 3 guests who I will introduce you to in just a minute. Our video audience can see them already. They're being very patient. They're very calm. You can see they're very excited and expectant, but they're not introduced yet, so they can't say anything. The panelists are going to talk about the big stories and biggest developments affecting worker power, workers, and unions, and we're going to talk about important worker power developments that are going to come in the near-term future. And then at the very end, as a truly insignificant thank you, but heartfelt, insignificant but heartfelt thank you to our guests, we are going to give them an opportunity for shameless plugs and shout outs. They can promote whatever or whoever they would like. Self-promotion is enthusiastically encouraged. And then, audience, if you are hungry for more, stay for Power Half Hour Overtime. We'll take questions and comments both from our live audience on LinkedIn, but also from our Power at Work community. We have some email questions. I'll tell you how to email your questions in if you'd like to do that for the next show. We can't take the emailed questions live on air, but we can take them for the next show. I'll tell you how to do that later on. That will be during overtime in about 28 minutes. Now, before I introduce you to the people who are going to make you smarter today, audience, stay up to date with the Power Half Hour by following the Power at Work page on LinkedIn and subscribing to Power at Work on poweratwork.us. If you go to poweratwork.us, there will be a subscription box right in front of you. Just give us your name and email address. We promise we won't sell or give away your information. It's just so we can keep you updated. Okay. Now let's meet our panel. Michael, I was going to ask you where you are physically located today. Are you in Albany today?
I'm in Albany, New York, yes, today.
Very well. So the capital district of my home state. He's the labor reporter for The Guardian, covering not just labor issues, but a wide range of work and workplace stories, public policy stories, immigration stories. It's Michael Sainato. Michael, welcome back to the Power Half Hour.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me back, Seth.
So from the People's Republic of Cambridge, Massachusetts, he's the Kestnbaum Professor of Labor and Industry at the Harvard Law School and a faculty co-director of the Center for Labor and a Just Economy. It's Ben Sachs. Now, Ben, is there a better time of year for academics than summertime? I mean, honestly.
It's a good time. Yeah, especially with the weather being what it is today. Finally, it's not snowing.
Yeah. That's my one complaint about Boston. Every time I go, it's either snowing or freezing rain. I don't know why that is. And from the still occupied capital of our country, Washington, D.C., he's the chief of policy and advocacy at the Groundwork Collaborative. It's our friend and my former White House colleague, Alex Jacquez. Alex, it is great to see you again, my friend.
Pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
All right, topic number 1. We're going to start with you on this one, Michael, just so you can sort of get the juices flowing. We're going to look over our shoulders. We're going to look in the rear view mirror. And you are going to tell us what was the most important or most interesting development or the biggest news story relating to workers, unions, worker power, worker collective action over the last couple of weeks. Michael.
My vote for that is, so the World Cup starts this week. The first U.S. game is in Los Angeles. And right now, nearly 2,000 stadium workers at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, they voted to authorize a strike. They have a press conference later today, which I'm assuming they're going to announce when they're going to walk off the job. But I think it's a continuation of what hotel workers in LA won, where they won a $30 minimum wage that it's not going to kick in until 2030, but that was historic for that industry. And I spoke with a couple of the stadium workers at SoFi, and they're just talking about the World Cup is going to make a lot of people a lot of money here in the U.S., and they're just looking for something that's fair. They talked about the low wages they're experiencing right now, and with the World Cup coming up, this is their Unite Here is using their leverage, and I think that's just a really interesting development, especially given how big this tournament is around the world.
Yeah. So can I just say that story makes me very, very happy. And it makes me happy for a number of reasons. Not because I hate soccer. I actually like soccer just fine. But it shows, and you made this point, and I just want to emphasize it. It shows that the labor movement is using leverage in important, smart, strategic ways. And let me say, Unite Here did the same thing in New York. And just last week, Claudia Ponte from the city talked about how the hotel workers in New York City used the moment of the World Cup to put pressure on the employers and to significantly increase the wages of the workers there. And I hope that happens as well in Los Angeles. It's really wonderful to see the use of real power, real leverage in order to get good outcomes for workers. I think that's a great one. All right, Ben Sachs, we're looking backwards. Last couple of weeks, what's the most interesting development, the biggest story, the most important thing that you've seen that our audience should know about affecting workers and worker power?
So I'm going to cheat and say two developments. One is very close to home, which is that the graduate students at Harvard who had been on strike and struck through commencement went back to work without an agreement. And so the union has made some progress at the bargaining table, and bargaining will obviously continue. But it was an outcome that I think we weren't hoping for. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. The student workers deserve a lot of credit for making the progress that they have. But it's maybe tough sledding ahead, at least for this union and this negotiation. The other thing I'll mention is from this U.S. Supreme Court, a case called Flower Foods versus Brock. Was a case that involves the ability of employers to require their workers to sign mandatory arbitration agreements and give up their ability to sue their employers in court. And in a kind of surprising and interesting development, the workers won at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that this group of workers were delivery drivers, similar to Amazon's last mile delivery drivers, are excluded from the coverage of this arbitration law, which means they can't be forced into arbitration, which means they maintain their right to sue. And so this is an important development for the drivers involved and for Amazon drivers. And it's also an interesting development as a matter of sort of the Supreme Court, because this is the fourth case in a row where workers have won exceptions to this mandatory arbitration system in unanimous decisions from the Supreme Court. So it's interesting and kind of a puzzle why in a court that's so hostile to labor and employees and employment rights in general, workers keep winning in this little corner of the law. So I was encouraged by that, and I'm interested by it.
So I'm dying to know your hypothesis as to why that's happening, but I really want to go back to the Harvard story, if you don't mind. So I have heard that at the University of Illinois, the graduate students who had also been out on strike also had to go back to work without winning a new contract. So my question for you about the Harvard workers is, do you attribute the current state of play, meaning going back to work with no contract after a strike or during a strike, is that simply because summer arrived and the leverage that those workers have during summer is a lot less? They can't hold grading back. They can't hold teaching back. Or does it have something to do with the concern that graduate students' status as employees who are covered by the National Labor Relations Act may be in danger? Or I guess option C is that it's both.
Yeah, and I should say I don't know the answer to this. I mean, I work here, but I'm not involved directly on either side, and so this is.
Well, maybe that's the explanation. Maybe that's we just figured it out. They don't have the best lawyer on campus helping them out.
Right. My speculation would be just what you laid out, which is it's possible, and I'm sure a part of the issue is it's difficult to maintain a strike in academia across the summer. The union did strike commencement, did picket commencement, and one result of that was that the mayor of Boston, who was going to speak at commencement, did not speak at commencement. But that didn't do the trick, so to speak. So it's part of it may be the summer, part of it may be the concern about the new board reversing Columbia University and holding graduate students to be students and not employees. But I don't know. But it's worrying as from the perspective of sort of overall labor movement strength. It's something to worry about, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Let me just ask one more quick question, and that is, has the university threatened the status of the union members as union members?
No.
Yeah. Very, very, very. That's going to be something we're going to have to watch very, very closely going forward. The board has not yet taken up this issue, at least as far as I know. It'll be interesting to see. All right, Alex, we're looking backwards. Last couple of weeks, biggest event, biggest story, biggest development, most interesting development affecting workers, worker power, and unions.
So last month, Aaron Dubé, who is a professor at University of Massachusetts Amherst, put out a book called The Wage Standard. I was lucky enough to participate on a panel with him at Solid State Books here in DC with Ben Zipper from the Economic Policy Institute, where couldn't imagine a happier time, three labor nerds talking about wages for about 45 minutes. And Aaron's book is truly phenomenal. I recommend everybody read it. He lays out the history of wage gains in the United States, particularly for those who are making less than median and lower incomes, and really shows the forces aligned against people making money and wages going up, and found, I think, tellingly that only two periods of time in post-1970 history, there's been two kind of very brief periods of time. One was in the late 90s in the boom that happened alongside the dot-com bubble, and one was from about 2019 to 2022 in the pre and then immediately post-COVID aftermath. Did we find real sustained wage gains for the bottom of the income distribution? And we all remember what happened in the last time that we did that. Everybody complained. Everybody said it was too hard to find workers, and workers wanted too much, and they had too much leverage, and they made huge gains for themselves. And many of those are being reversed now. But I think it is really important to put back on the table. Aaron is a scholar of the minimum wage and the economic impacts of minimum wage laws, has done thorough debunkings of a lot of the anti-worker talking points about the minimum wage. And he's put forward some recommendations in the book around targeting the 2/3 of median income as a level for the minimum wage. Of course, we haven't raised it here in the US since 2009 at this point. It still sits at $7.25, although states have increased it since then, and really gets into wage floors and sectoral standards for wage bargaining, sort of like the models seen in California with fast food workers and New York as well, and puts forward, I think, a set of ideas that we're not talking about enough in this time where everybody is focused on prices and maybe not enough on wages. But we've seen the Economic Policy Institute put out a sort of accompanying wage briefing. Roosevelt Institute did the same. And hopefully this topic will reemerge as a topic that policymakers take on. There's been a few candidates and policymakers talking about new minimum wage bills that they're going to be introducing, and really hope we start talking about raising the wages for particularly those who have really not seen any gains over the last 40 years outside of two very brief periods of time.
Yeah. Okay. So you're watching the midterm elections very, very closely, and affordability is certainly one of the top issues, maybe the top issue for voters around the country. And I'm going to ask you to speculate about this. I think we've talked about this before, but why is it that the affordability debate is not about affordability and wages? Is it because there have been some real wage gains over the last few years and there's just no way for workers to catch up, so people don't talk about that issue? They talk about bringing prices down, which, by the way, much less likely than raising wages. It's just a lot less likely to happen given the levers that government has available to it or is willing to use. I think there are some levers they could use. Why isn't the political debate about affordability and inflation-adjusted wages?
I think it's really the visceral impact of nominal prices. And we've seen some good work by our former colleague, Jared Bernstein, economists and others who have tried to really disentangle why people are so mad about this economy in ways that go beyond even the financial crisis and the oil shock of the 1970s. And what he really kind of attunes it to is that big spike in nominal prices that was way above trend. We'd had low inflation for a long time. And there will be a period of time where those prices will be sticky in people's minds, and they will continue to reference a gallon of milk in the dollars that they remember it, right, in 2019 or 2020, and are going to have a hard time updating that. And I think that's part of the reason why, although I think part of the other reason why is that there is some skittishness. You saw the Federal Reserve, who had really kind of committed to running the economy hot and then backing off once inflation hit in 2021. You've seen, of course, the complaints from the business community about wage growth and fueling inflation. And when people are really mad about prices and inflation, there is that idea that wages could, and rising wages could, have a spiral effect. Although I think what we've learned is that the channel of transmission in our case of inflation certainly is just not the same, and particularly not now with the war in Iran and tariffs. Really not much to do with wage gains because real wages are falling, and so they're not pushing up prices. But I think there is still some skittishness there. I do hope we start having a balanced conversation about wages and prices going forward.
Yeah, inflation is not workers' fault. That's what we can say absolutely for sure. Inflation is not workers' fault. All right, topic number 2. Guests, get out your crystal balls. We're going to look into the future. Now, not 2078. We're going to look over the next few weeks, next few months, next few years, and we're looking for the most important story or development or innovation or event affecting workers, worker power, and unions in the near-term future. Ben, why don't you start us off?
Great. So here, I think this probably won't surprise you. I would say the fact that Trump is about to get a third nominee onto the National Labor Relations Board, this guy, James Macy, is a hugely significant development. And it's significant for a kind of arcane reason, but nonetheless significant. And the reason is that even though there's a 2-to-1 majority on the board now, two Republicans, 1 Democrat, the board has a longstanding norm that they don't reverse major precedent without 3 votes. So I think last time I was on, we talked about whether the board would stick to that, and they kind of have. At least it seems that way. They've had a majority for a while, but haven't done sort of major damage to the Biden precedent and the other longstanding pro-labor precedent. When Macy gets on the board, it'll be 3-to-1. and they'll just have a kind of green light to do whatever they want to existing board law. And I'm extremely worried about what that will look like. We've already mentioned the Columbia decision holding that graduate students are employees. That could be on the chopping block. The CEMEX decision giving some sort of quasi card check rights to workers in certain settings could be on the chopping block. The rule that emerged from the Amazon case banning captive audience meetings, that could be gone. And there's just, the list goes on and on and on. And they'll sort of have unconstrained authority to do what they want to federal labor law, which, obviously is in terrible shape as it is. But my fear is that it's about to get a lot worse.
Yeah, I thought you would have added into that conversation. I believe this is correct, and you should tell me if I've got this wrong. But another concern that they have is that I think that Dave Prouty, the one Democrat on the board, his term expires, I want to say in August. And so there was the danger that there would not be a quorum on the board, so the board would not be able to do anything at all. Mm-hmm. So if you get a third Republican on, that solves the problem of the quorum. I think I'm remembering that correctly, but I may have it wrong. But let me ask you a question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you have it right. My understanding is that the administration has put forward a package of 2 nominees, which includes Macy and Prouty. So there will be 4 members on the board, but 3 of them will be Republican.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Are you surprised that President Trump is nominating a Democrat to be on the board?
I guess in part, as opposed to just putting up a second Republican.
5 Republicans.
Yeah. I don't pretend to understand the political calculus, but it could be something like, if he nominated 2 Republicans, that might have alienated some of the more moderate voices in the Senate, because it violates, such a long-standing norm, and he doesn't get much out of that. 3-1 is not so different than 4-0. They have 2 years to do what they want, and that's maybe good enough. And you avoid the fight that nominating 2 Republicans would have produced.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, Alex, tell us what's coming down the pike for workers, worker power, and unions.
I am looking not a couple weeks or months into the future, but possibly mere minutes, if not hours. I am watching the House of Representatives today, which is set to vote on the Faster Labor Contracts Act. And the reason this is an important bill is because 4 Republicans have joined with Democrats, it is bipartisan, to force a discharge petition. I think months ago, we were talking about a discharge petition with regard to President Trump's handling of the employee unions. This very, very rarely happens where you get a vote to the floor over the speaker's objection. And the Faster Labor Contracts Act would put shot clocks and enforceable arbitration on getting a contract. I know you have talked millions of times at Power at Work around the challenges. Once you go through all of the challenges and the tribulations and the massive success of getting and forming a union and getting it certified, very few of those unions actually reach first contracts. And so what this bill would do is it would require companies to start bargaining in 10 days. After 90 days of bargaining with no contract, it would force federal mediation to step in. And at, I believe, 110 days or 120 days, they would then enter into arbitration, binding arbitration, where a contract could be imposed. And so really hope that this passes. It should pass the House, go over to the Senate. There are some Republicans in the Senate who are in favor of this bill. Maybe not right now enough to crack 60, but if we continue to see pressure, particularly from the working and union, either tolerant or adjacent side of the Republican Party. Sean O'Brien and the Teamsters. Sean O'Brien had a statement yesterday. He's watching this vote very closely and will use this as a barometer to see who is actually a pro-labor Republican and who is just using the rhetoric. So hopefully it can push it through on the Senate side as well. And this would be a huge development. And one of the one of the major barriers to building actual union power is getting that first contract and being able to speed up that process and get a binding contract within the year and within 120 days. I think would be huge. So the vote is scheduled today. We'll be watching the floor and then see what happens next.
Right. And I think it's likely to pass in the House. Give me just a number. What percentage likelihood do you think there is that this bill passes the Senate?
20%, but only because nothing passes the Senate. You could see, there's not going to be a lot of deal making here. I think the one hope for it is it gets caught on a hotline where nobody can muster the will or the attention to object to it, and it kind of goes as a unanimous consent, which happens sometimes to these kinds of bills, not often, but I don't think you'll see extensive debate and hearings and floor action on this bill in the Senate, just because that's just not how things work anymore. It's not how we legislate, but you could see it wrapped into some sort of big year-end conclusion or a hotline, perhaps. And so I'll give it 1 in 5 in the Senate.
Yeah, I think that's the likeliest outcome, is it somehow gets thrown into it's a deal where a bunch of stuff gets thrown together at the end of the year. Okay, Michael, we are looking into the future and figuring out what's coming for workers, worker power, and unions. Tell us something.
Well, Alex took my answer, but I have to back up. I've been talking with a lot of congressional candidates from labor backgrounds. It appears that the Democratic Party is actively recruiting candidates looking to get Democrats elected in Congress who can act as a counterbalance to the Trump administration. In past, congressional races, I don't think there's been nearly as many as what, we're seeing, this midterm race. So I think that's going to be really interesting. One, are these candidates going to resonate more? Are they going to flip a lot of these districts that the Democrats are, seeking to flip to regain a majority in the House? And then, once they're elected, what is that, worker background? How is that going to be reflected in the way they govern? So I think, keeping an eye on those races, those candidates, and how they fare over the next, couple of years will be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. This is partly an effort to deal with the problem that working people are tired of getting stabbed in the back by progressive Democrats who say that they're with them and then they end up not being with them. And we've had a recent example of that we've talked about here in Virginia, unfortunately. All right, we're at topic number 3. It's everybody's favorite topic, and that is shameless plugs and shout outs. Each guest is going to get about a minute to be able to shout out anyone or anything they would like. Alex Jacquez, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
My shameless plug is that our executive director over here at Groundwork Collaborative, Lindsay Owens, who was also herself a former labor staffer in the Senate and in the House, she has a book coming out on September 29th that I am very excited about. It's called Gouged. It's the history of price tag and fair price in America. And it is a collection of all the ways that companies and corporations are using technology and algorithms and software to get a little bit more out of you, to nickel and dime you, to trap you into subscriptions and into rental contracts and not even be able to repair your own stuff. And goes through, I've read it several times now, goes through the history of pricing, the evolution of these techniques, and then really where we've seen artificial intelligence and technology and software really perfect and hone it. So if you've ever hailed an Uber ride and your battery's been low and been surprised why your prices were a little higher than you might have expected, Gouge will be coming out in September, and we're very excited about it.
I like that you combined the shameless plug with the boss suck up. I like that very much. It's
not my first rodeo.
Yeah, you're a multitasker. I love that. Michael Sainato, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
Check me out on Blue Sky. It's really the only social media platform I use, unfortunately, given the landscape of that. And, just check out my work at The Guardian. I put stuff up every week. I'm very, very, very busy. So that's my shameless plug.
Absolutely. That's perfectly fine. Ben Sachs, what's your shameless plug or shout out?
All right, I've got two again, so I'll be really quick. I have a new law review article out in the Minnesota Law Review. It's called "Is Labor Preemption Good for Labor?" And the question it asks is labor preemption good for worker organizing and worker power building? It's a complicated question. There's no clear answer. But one thing that we point out is that the upside of labor preemption, that is the number of new union members we could add in blue states, vastly outnumbers the number of union workers that would be lost in red states. So the paper goes through that analysis and then offers a whole host of ideas for what states might do if they were freed from federal labor preemption. That brings me to my second plug, which is that the Center for Labor and a Just Economy is about to release a draft bill on sectoral bargaining, which could be enacted at the state level today with respect to workers who are excluded from the federal law, and maybe in the future could be enacted at the state level if things happen in the preemption context that gives states more discretion to act. But it's a terrific bill. It's the product of hundreds of hours of work with hundreds of people involved, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm looking forward to its release.
And where would state legislators who are watching this show right now find that model bill?
When it's out on the clje.org website.
Excellent. All right, audience, stick with us if you can. We're going to begin the Power Half Hour's overtime in just a minute. For Ben Sachs, Michael Sainato, Alex Jacquez, and our producer, Ayush Kanvalkar, thank you for joining the Power Half Hour. Stick around for overtime, but for right now, class is dismissed. Okay, guests, take a breath, take a sip of whatever beverage you have in front of you. And right now, Ayush is loading up the questions that came from the PowerWork community. Hey, live audience on LinkedIn, if you would like to ask a question of this group of guests, this very distinguished group of panelists, you can add a comment on this stream. Ayush will jump over to LinkedIn. He will find it. He will catch it. He will put it in the chat, and I will read it, and everybody will get to hear your question. You can do a lot of the people who send us their email questions want to do it anonymously. If you want to do it anonymously, fine. If you want me to read your name in front of this esteemed group of people, I'd be delighted to do that as well. Let me also say, I promised that I would tell you how you can send in your email questions. The email address for doing that is poweratwork@theburnscenter.org. That's THEBURNES center.org. Poweratwork@theburnscenter.org. Send us your emails whenever you'd like. We will read it on the next show, not on this show, and maybe the next group of panelists will respond to that as well. Okay, let me see what we have. Okay. Well, I think that, Ben, folks knew you were going to be here because this one might be for you. This is reading the quoting from our PowerWork community member. This is usually the time of year when the Supreme Court breaks the hearts of people who believe in truth, justice, and the American way with its biggest decisions of the year. What decisions do you expect will be issued in the next couple of weeks? I guess they mean before July 4th, which is usually the deadline that the court sets for itself. So what decisions do you expect will be issued in the next couple of weeks that will affect the labor movement?
Just to repeat what I said earlier, there is this positive development from the Supreme Court in the Flowers Foods case, which again protects a group of workers from the bite of mandatory arbitration. So I don't want to lose sight of that, glimmer. There's the case involving the question of whether the president has the authority or the constitutional authority to dismiss the direct heads of independent agencies is going to be decided in the next few weeks.
That's the slaughter case, right? The
Correct,
Federal
yes.
Trade Commission case, right?
And whether the question is whether the court will reverse its longstanding rule of what's known as the Humphreys executor case, that allows Congress to insulate from presidential removal authority certain agency heads. Everybody that knows this area seems to think the Supreme Court will reverse Humphreys executor, and that will give the president sort of political discretion to fire agency heads, even at independent agencies, which includes the National Labor Relations Board. That will have the effect of politicizing even more the board, and it's already a political agency and highly politicized. But I think it will get worse. And the risk will be that, especially in this administration, if the employer involved is a friend of the administration, so to speak, they may get favorable treatment. I mean, that's what happens when you have sort of complete politicization of agencies like the board. So that's the one that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, I share that worry. I agree with you that it is very likely. I think every observer I've talked to, in my own personal sense, is that they will overturn Humphrey's executor in the slaughter decision. There have been some very powerful arguments made that the NLRB is different from the FTC and it needs to be treated differently. I think probably the dividing line the court is going to have to draw is not between the NLRB and the FTC, but between the NLRB and the FTC on one side and the Federal Reserve on the other side. That is where the gravest danger to our economy comes in, although the grave danger to worker rights is really quite apparent. And the only limitation on the president in firing board members who make decisions he doesn't like is that he has to go through new board members would have to go through the confirmation process. And that can be a limiting factor. It's not necessarily a limiting factor in every case, but it could be a limiting factor.
No,
anybody else want to jump in on that one? Supreme Court cases that are coming down the pike that are going to affect workers and worker power? Okay, let me get to the next question. The AFL-CIO convention has just started. I believe it's in Minneapolis. Can we expect any news to come out of the convention? Now, Michael, I can't help but observe that you are in Albany, New York, capital of New York State, not Minneapolis, Minnesota, which I believe, I don't really actually know, I'm embarrassed to say, the capital of Minnesota. I think it is. I think it may not be. I don't know. Maybe the biggest city. Shame on me. You're not there. Is that because you think that, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think the AFL-CIO convention is going to generate some meaningful news? Let me just say, the one piece of meaningful news that we know has happened is Liz Schuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, and Fred Redmond, the secretary-treasurer of the AFL-CIO, have been reelected by the convention. So they will continue to serve until the next convention, which I think is 4 or 5 years away. But is there any other news that we expect to come out of the AFL-CIO convention?
Well, what came out, I believe it was yesterday, that AFL-CIO said that, a few years ago they pledged to unionize 1 million more union members, and they said they did that, and they upped their goal to 2 million. Although they've been criticism of that number, given you have to organize and add so many union members to keep up with the population growth of the U.S. and the growth of the labor market. Although what the Trump administration is doing to immigrants might impact that. So I think that goal and regardless of the veracity of we need a lot more and how bad how much we've lost in the past few decades, I think that's it's a glimmer of hope. It's reflective of the fact that the vast majority of Americans they favor labor unions. If they had a chance to join one, they would. Labor unions are more popular than both political parties. So I think that was one of the big news stories to come out of the convention that I've seen so far.
Yeah, that's sort of faint praise. There are diseases that are more popular than the two political parties in America, so I'm not really sure that that's saying very much. But it is true that the polling still, the Gallup polling on the favorability of unions is still around 70%. It hasn't moved in several years, so it's becoming increasingly fixed in the public mind. Whether or not that continues to turn into organizing opportunities for the labor movement, I'm not exactly sure. There was a big jump in union membership in the last BLS union member survey of, I think it was 400,000 or so, slightly over 400,000. But we're going to have to see whether or not they're going to be able to continue that kind of growth. That is a very aggressive growth, helped, interestingly enough, by the federal sector. A lot of people who were in the federal sector, even though there's a downsizing going on in the federal sector, joined unions because they were under attack and they knew they needed the help. They badly needed the help. Anybody else want to mention anything about the AFL-CIO convention? I don't mean to downplay it, but does anybody have anything that they'd like to add that's going to come out of the AFL convention?
I know I was at an event with President Liz Schuler a few weeks ago, and she was touting some of their forthcoming polling and research work on how workers and members feel about AI in the workplace. And I know some of that has started to roll out through their principles for AI adoption. But I think it's going to be take more of a center stage and an obvious conversation in the convention and afterward. And I think the findings are not surprising for those who have been looking at some of this polling and people's real mistrust and distrust of artificial intelligence, particularly how it's being rolled out in the workplace. I think one of the striking numbers that she had presented was that something like 75% agreed that workers should have notice before they are being surveilled or monitored or tracked by artificial intelligence programs, yet only 7% reported that their company had let them know that they had. And we know that is a vast undercounting. So how AI is impacting all the different affiliates too is going to be an interesting conversation. I know a lot of attention on data centers recently, how the building trades are feeling about the work that they're getting in this huge capital boom, while some of the other affiliates are very concerned and rightly nervous about what this kind of influx of AI in the workplace might do to their jobs. So I expect it'll be a big target going forward too.
Yeah, I think that's a very important call out. There is not dissent, I would say discussion inside the AFL right now about artificial intelligence and what it means for members. And some unions are very directly affected by it. SAG-AFTRA, for example, has been a real leader on this issue for a whole bunch of maybe obvious reasons. The building trades leaders in other ways on data centers and other construction-related issues in AI and electricity generation and electricity transmission issues associated with AI. And then there are other unions that are just really quite rejectionist. They don't want to hear about AI. They don't want to be involved with it. They don't want their employers to adopt it. Some unions are in partnership with some of the AI companies trying to figure out how to train their members to become expert in AI and use it in a way that's constructive. There's the same kind of discussion that's going on around the country, but I agree with you that and this is distinct compared to the rest of the world. The U.S. really stands alone with overwhelming concern and negativity around AI. It's not that the rest of the world's workforce, the working class people around the world are embracing AI necessarily, but there's not the real hostility and worry about it. And I think that fits into the larger economic unhappiness that we're seeing, sinking consumer confidence, sinking projections about what's going to happen in the future, sinking employee projections about what's going to happen to their own companies. And we have the tech industry to thank for that, because they were going around talking about how this is the end of work as we know it. That bit them. That is biting them in fights over data centers around the country. So, okay, let's turn to our next question. Very simple one. What is the biggest organizing drive that no one is talking about?
I think and maybe to call it a drive is maybe slightly overtaken by events, but the win for Massachusetts rideshare workers and the 70,000, I believe, workers are now represented by the app union in Massachusetts after a law passed that was established as essentially sectoral bargaining for the independent contractors who make up the Uber and Lyft and other rideshare drivers in the state. This is an approach that I think is gaining some steam as a potential model for not just rideshare, but beyond. And they have, as we were talking about the Faster Labor Contracts Act, as part of the law that was passed, there are enforceable timelines for a contract and arbitration. So they will get a contract done in one way or another. And I think just maybe a few weeks ago was the certification of what is now it'll be the largest single union drive in quite some time. It's 70,000 members.
Yeah. So let me add on top of that. I got an email from Talia Soglin from the Chicago Tribune, pointing me to a story by Olivia Olander of the Chicago Tribune, formerly of another outlet, used to cover the Labor Department, talking about the increasing likelihood that Illinois is going to pass a law like Massachusetts law, which could result in another 100,000 rideshare drivers joining the labor movement. And Dave Madeline has been on this show talking about California and hundreds of thousands of rideshare drivers in California, maybe the largest market for rideshare drivers in the country, joining the labor movement. So it is conceivable that there could be as many as 800,000, maybe more, but at least 800,000 new union members joining the labor movement because of these rideshare laws. Or I should say collective bargaining laws that cover rideshare independent contractors. That would be the most remarkable union organizing success maybe in the history of the country, certainly in the recent history of the country. It would change the trajectory of the labor movement as a whole. It is a different model than we have for most private sector workers in our country. But it is, to me, one of the most exciting developments that's going on right now. I mean, 70,000 workers all at once, 100,000 workers all at once, hundreds of thousands of workers all at once being welcomed into the labor movement and being represented by unions, the resources that that's going to provide, the representation that's going to, the increase in wages, the better protections those workers are going to get. It's really an extraordinary story. So I agree with you that that's a huge story. Anybody have a candidate for another organizing drive that no one's talking about, or do you want to comment more on the rideshare situation?
I'll just add to the rideshare. California SEIU, I think, is trying to push. And that's been the kind of battleground against these rideshare companies. With AB5, which was overturned by Prop 22, and just and then now there's the union push in California and in Illinois, like you said, I think is really important. And then another I think union drive to mention, or union drives to mention, is just kind of what's to make of Starbucks, Amazon, Whole Foods, like those companies where union elections, workers have won union elections, but there's like that's where the Fast Labor Contracts Act is seeking to resolve those issues, where it's been years and years, and the employers have been dragging their heels on and reaching a contract with these workers, and it stifled those union drives, even though Starbucks is still continuing to add stores every month and just continuing to grow within their footprint. But those are, I think, really big battles, and just an existential issue. I think the labor movement has to kind of try to figure out is how to move forward, and how to resolve the delays that we're seeing in those cases.
Do you? Can I ask you about that? Because our friend Harold Phillips raised this issue on the last show, but let me ask you, because you're a very close observer of these things, Michael, and Ben and Alex, if you want to jump in, what is the precipitating event that changes the behavior of let's forget about Amazon, because I'm not really sure their behavior can be changed absent really aggressive government-driven legal action. Is there an event or a thing, not necessarily just an event, that can change Starbucks' behavior in their negotiations with the union and cause them to actually cut a deal?
So, I mean, certainly, if consumers started caring more or responding more to the union drives and the strikes and the rest. I mean, Starbucks would listen, I think, pretty quickly if there was a successful boycott. The difficulty, to state the obvious, is there's thousands of Starbucks all over the country, and despite the remarkable success of the Starbucks organizing effort, the union doesn't have anything like national coverage, and so it's a question of how do you take a movement or a union that represents a small subsector of a national chain and develop economic leverage. And the great boycott that the United Farm Workers led, that Dolores Huerta led, is a sort of a hopeful analog to what the Starbucks union might do. But obviously, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, and you'd have to have a massive mobilization that involves the whole labor movement, I think, with union members seeing it as a part of their responsibility to their own union to stop doing business with Starbucks. And I just haven't seen that kind of mobilization yet. The only other thought I have is that every company, particularly companies that depend as heavily on logistics as Starbucks, they have pressure points. They have delivery trucks, they have warehouses where their goods come from, they import goods from overseas. They have pressure points. Now, the union is organizing the end of those supply chains, which is the consumer-facing stores. One wonders if they could organize, or another union could organize some of those pressure points and put real meaningful pressure on large swaths of the Starbucks operation rather than 700 out of, I think they have over 9,000 stores. That's just not enough, it seems to me, to change it. But I take your point. I think consumer action is one possibility, but maybe there are this pressure point, and who knows that there may be. I don't know what I don't know about the organizing drive there. Maybe they're going after those efforts right now. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Alex, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think the progress they did see in bargaining a few years ago during the Biden administration, I think it had to do with, you had an administration that was pro-union, and they were making had like successful campaigns on the union was trying to get Starbucks off of college campuses. So they did it at Cornell. I think there were a couple campuses in California where they were successful, and those footprints are really important for the company. They to get those customers loyal really early on. So I don't think they've really focused their efforts on revamping that, but I think that was like an avenue where I think they saw success, and that really pushed some movement at the bargaining table in 2023, 24.
Yeah, very good. Okay, our last question. By how many points will the union members on the New York Knicks defeat the union members on the San Antonio Spurs in Game 4 of the NBA Finals? Now, I'm kidding. That's my question. I threw that in there just for fun. As a huge Knicks fan,
Seth, can I do 2 seconds on this, because I've been doing the rounds on this as folks. I'm a huge sports fan, and particularly where the economics of sports intersect. And so,
but that doesn't, wait a minute. As soon as you say the phrase economics of sports, you can hear the fun getting sucked out of my basketball team. Go ahead, Alex. If you have to give us an economics lesson, go ahead.
Game four going in prices for the cheapest ticket at Madison Square Garden is going to run you $10,000. In 1999, the last time the Knicks were in the finals, $15 to get through the gate. Of course, some of this is New York City, highest concentration of millionaires. All the celebrities want to be courtside. But some of this is really just the model of how sports have changed and the attraction of higher income clientele and fans and corporate boxes, and just a squeezing of the middle class family who certainly can't afford to go to a Knicks finals game, but hopefully at least see a championship this year. So I'm watching those prices. They are unbelievable.
They truly are unbelievable. It is mostly a New York story. This is why you hear the stories of New York fans flying to Cleveland, getting a hotel room and buying tickets to see the Knicks play Cleveland in Cleveland. You also see it in San Antonio because it's cheaper to fly, get a hotel room, and buy a ticket in another city's arena to see the Knicks than it is to do it at Madison Square Garden. Now, in fairness, the prices that you're quoting are secondary market prices. They're not face value. So the people who have season tickets, or the people who bought face value tickets when they were first available, and who knows when even that was, they were not paying $10,000. They were paying whatever the face value is, which is still the highest in the NBA. Maybe the Lakers are competitive, but it's still the highest in the NBA. But these secondary market prices are absolutely, they're absolutely out of the question. I'm amazed that there are people who are paying $20,000 to bring one person with them to see a game. I've been a New York Knicks fan for 56 years, and I can't imagine spending that kind of money. I really can't. It's inconceivable. Okay, that is it. I think that's it. Yes, that is it for Overtime. Thank you very much to Ben, Alex, and Michael for being here. Thanks again to our Yush, our producer. Thanks to you, audience, for hanging in there. We will see you on Power at Work again very soon. Are you looking for more labor radio shows and podcasts? Well, look no further. Go to the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The network connects more than 200 radio shows and podcasts. To find more great labor content, go to www.laborradionetwork.org. Power at Work is there. You should be too.